All right, let's go ahead and get started. Today we're just going to talk about the 9 secrets that I think every Denver home buyer should know. And the reason why I think this is so important is because oftentimes I end up working with buyer clients who come to me after they've had a bad experience with another realtor, or they just feel like they can't win offers, or they just don't know what to do. And they just started in the middle of the process, so they didn't feel success. And so what I'm going to help you do today is build a container in which you should operate so that you can have a successful real estate transaction and ultimately meet the end goal of buying a home. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So first thing obviously is the goal, and that's finding your dream home at the price that you want and the terms that you want. And so when we talk about find your dream home, I always tell people, let's talk about what your must-haves are and the nice-to-haves are. We'll operate under the must-haves, and then we'll backfill with the nice-to-haves. Must-haves are going to be location, size of home, things that you can't change. Nice-to-haves are things that you could change, but you don't really want to change, such as a updated kitchen, remodeled bathroom, things like that. Smart pricing. So before you get started, set your budget. If you're paying cash, that's pretty easy to do. You say, I have this amount of money to spend. This is what I'm going to spend. If you're financing, you need to establish how much money you want to put down as a down payment, and then determine what you're comfortable with in your monthly payment. Because when you're buying a home and you're financing it, you're really buying the monthly payment, not so much the price of the home. And then the last thing is negotiate smarter. A lot of people think that they can just throw an offer with a super big number and they're going to win. I'll tell you that that's wrong. When you negotiate smarter, you learn what the motivation of the seller is, where they're going, if they need time, things like that. So then you can package up a nice, pretty offer that meets all of their needs instead of just a big price number. So a big thing on buying a home are going to be your non-negotiables, the things that you are not willing to compromise on. Again, that's going to be location, school district, commute to work, things like that. Set the pricing, like I've said. Don't let the emotions get in your way of making a good offer. A lot of times buyers get caught up in the negotiation up front, and then they're like, oh, we'll just give them $50,000 more so we can win. And then they sleep on it and they immediately regret that decision. So if you have the pricing set up front, then you know what you're willing to operate in or out of, and it's easy. Last thing is make sure that you're ready to act. So the timing is super, super important. If you do all the research up front, you'll know exactly what you're willing or not willing to do. So then you can make a decision easily to say, yes, this meets our needs, or no, it doesn't, we're moving on. Don't let the pressure of the situation make you make a bad decision that you're going to regret. Next thing is how everyone gets paid. A lot of people are scared to ask a realtor how they get paid, and a lot of realtors actually don't like to talk about it. So I like to just have the tough conversations or the awkward conversations right up front. So how we get paid as agents. So typically in a real estate transaction, there's 2 agents. One agent represents the seller, one agent represents the buyer, and then there's a title company who's the neutral third party, also known as a closing company or escrow or something like that. So the 2 agents in the transaction typically get paid by the seller. The seller pays the commissions. It's part of the negotiations up front for what the seller is or is not willing to pay. I say that typically because I would say 99% of the time that happens. Every now and then we come across a transaction where a seller doesn't pay any commission, and then we have to figure out a different compensation model. And we can have those conversations as they come up. But going back to the typical model, listing agent represents the seller. They act as the representative and the advocate for the seller in the transaction. And then you have the buyer's agent, who works on behalf of the buyer to help identify and pursue the right property, negotiate the terms that are going to make the buyer happy, and ultimately get to the closing table. And then last, you have the title company, who's the neutral third party. What they do is they represent the contract. They make sure that everything that's negotiated in the contract to buy and sell is executed properly. Everything happens as planned, and the deed transfers, financing is set, the money comes in and is dispersed through the title company. And each buyer and seller pay a nominal fee to make that happen. So the next thing that always comes up in my conversations, well, I shouldn't say always, but most of the time, the question I get is, do I get a better deal if I go work directly with the listing agent? And I will tell you that the listing agent works for the seller. Now they can tell you they can remain neutral or they won't advocate for the seller, but I will tell you that that's really hard to do, and here's why. When I represent a seller, before we put the home on the market, we're working together for 3, 4, 5 weeks getting the home ready. We're getting into a really great rapport and we start having a great relationship because I'm meeting with them as a client. I'm telling them everything they need to do to get top dollar for their home. I'm managing renovations or repairs. We're getting stagers in, painters in, and I'm in constant communication with them, getting their home ready for the market. So by the time the sign goes in the yard, we have a pretty great working relationship. And I know at that time pretty much what it's going to take to win a deal for them, what their ideal terms are, what their ideal buyer looks like, what their ideal price looks like. I have all of this information and this knowledge of how them and their family is working. So when a buyer comes to me and thinks that they're going to save money by working with me directly, I already know the dollar that it's going to take. I know everything about it. And so I can say, look, in order to win this deal, this is exactly what you need to do. And that buyer has no representation. They have nobody advocating on their behalf to say, hey, let's pump the brakes. That's too much money for this house. Or no, I don't think you should waive your inspection opportunity. And here's why. So buyers think that they're getting a really great deal, but really they're not. They're getting railroaded by the listing agent and the seller, which is great for the seller. When I'm on the seller side of it, I love when this happens because it makes the deal go super easy for the seller. But it's really bad for the buyer. And the buyer thinks, oh, the seller isn't going to pay 2 commissions, so it's a great deal. But the commissions are already negotiated up front. So really all that happens is that listing agent gets 2 pieces of the pie and the seller gets to railroad the buyer. And the only person who loses in that situation is the buyer, but they feel like they won. So it's always a bad deal, in my opinion. So let's talk about organizing your money. And this is another thing that people are scared to talk about up front. And I think it's one of the most important things. So cash, if you're paying cash, cool. You have flexibility on what you can do, what you can't do. Most people are not paying cash. So they need to come up with a down payment, which is in cash. And then they're in the middle column of financing. And financing is great because it gives you options. It gives you additional capital to buy a home that you couldn't pay just cash for. So when you're financing, make sure that you investigate all the options that are available. There are hundreds of loan programs that are available, and you may not qualify for all of them. Some are only for first-time homebuyers, some are only for first responders or doctors or whatever. But make sure that you understand your different options on interest rates, loan products, mortgage insurance, stacking a first and second mortgage. There's so many things you can do to be creative to get what you want. Just make sure you and your lender investigate all of it. And then last, I'll say, make sure you manage your credit. Your credit gets checked multiple times through the transaction. So don't make any major changes to your credit, such as taking on new debt, paying off major debt, unless the lender tells you to. You don't want to change your credit profile from the initial time they pull the credit through the time that you close. Because if you make any changes, that will affect your qualification. The biggest thing that I see buyers do is the lender says, great, your loan's clear to close. We're going to close in 4 days. And then the buyer goes and buys furniture on credit. Well, they think, well, my loan is done. It's not. The loan is not done until it's fully funded and you have keys to the house. So don't do anything that could jeopardize that. And what would jeopardize that is a new credit inquiry, buying furniture at 0%, buying a new car, any of those things. Just don't do it. And I promise you'll save yourself a lot of stress. So let's talk about when you make your offer. I always tell my buyers that I work with, price gets you noticed, but terms get you the keys. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is a home could be listed for $500,000 and you could offer $10 million. And that's immediately going to get you noticed, right? That's going to bring your offer to the top of the pile. But the terms you could offer could say, yeah, I'll give you that $10 million in 5 years. And then immediately they're like, okay, cool, that doesn't work for me. So this isn't even a real offer. So the price gets you noticed. You need to make an offer that's a reasonable price for what you're willing to pay. And then the terms get you the keys. So that means the timing, the contingencies, the concessions you're asking for. Concessions could be, hey, I'll buy your house, but I need you to buy my interest rate down with $10,000 so that I can afford it. The timing could fall into, I'll buy your house, but I need to close in 45 days, not in 21 days like you're asking for. And so if a seller says, I want you to close in 21 days, but you say, no, I'll do 40, they may go, hey, I need the money in 20 days. So I'm going to go to somebody else who might be paying less, but they're going to give me the money sooner. And then the last thing is contingencies. So contingencies are put into the offer. And what they're doing is they're saying, hey, I'm going to give you X price, but I need these 5 things to happen, and then I'll close. So you could say, my inspection needs to be clean. It needs to appraise. I need to get a final loan approval, things like that. You don't want to make really wonky concession or contingencies that makes a seller not want to work with you. Like, hey, my grandpa built a deck once, so he's actually a contractor, so I want him to look at it first. And then I'm going to have an inspector come in, and then I'm going to have my dad come in, and then I'll decide if I'm moving forward. That makes you look crazy, and the seller's not going to work with you. So I'm not saying waive your inspection, but I'm saying be reasonable in your contingency period. And if you have reasonable contingencies, reasonable concessions, and reasonable timing with a good price, you're more than likely going to win over the person who just puts a really high price and doesn't craft the offer in a great way for the seller otherwise. So talking contingencies, this is where the invisible power of negotiation comes in. So when you make your offer, you're saying, I'm going to give you X price. I need these 5 things to happen, and then I'm going to close on this date. So X price on this date if these 5 things are good. So when you go through the negotiation of an inspection, you may find out that there's something wrong with the house that needs to be fixed, or it needs a new roof, or the water heater is going to fail, or there's a million things that can come up. I could spend days talking about each thing that could possibly happen. But that gives you an opportunity to renegotiate. So you could say, I'm going to pay you X, but then I just found out that it has these 5 issues that need corrected. So I'm not going to pay you X anymore, or I will pay you X, but you need to do these 5 repairs. And then you start negotiating again. So there's multiple stops in the transaction where you continue to negotiate, and the sales price and terms are not typically finalized until you meet all the contingencies. And then you can close, and then you've got a final set price. So what I remind everybody of is everything's negotiable. It's always a no unless you ask. You're never going to know unless you ask the seller for, hey, I know that originally I said you could take that kitchen refrigerator, but the radon came in high. So how about if you leave me the fridge and I'll deal with the radon on my own? And so by giving them some leeway or giving them some options, they're more likely to negotiate with you versus saying, hey, the radon's high, I need a $10,000 price reduction, right? That's unreasonable. And when you look unreasonable, they're not going to work with you. If you do an inspection and you find out, hey, I just don't want to buy this house, there's just way too much going on. Even if the seller fixes everything, I'm not comfortable moving forward. You have the option to cancel, and you have the option to move on and find a new house. All right. Before you are in a contract, before you find the home, you have to actually start looking. You have to do some searches. And so what I tell everybody is you peek, I seek. And what that means is we will set a parameter or multiple parameters of what you're searching for. And I'll start looking, sending you homes based on those parameters. However, I can't read your mind. So if your parameters change, or you say, hey, I was willing to only look in this high school boundary, but we can go ahead and expand it as long as we're in the same district, then we can make changes. But if you don't tell me that, I don't know. So I'm going to keep sending you homes that are just in this one parameter. So when you are searching, or you tell your friends, hey, we're buying a house, we're so excited, they're going to start sending you listings. They're going to start sending you Facebook posts of, hey, did you see this house? This house is coming on the market soon. And so you're going to be getting hit with a lot of data from a lot of people. My job is to filter the data. So if you find a house, on Zillow, Redfin, realtor.com, whatever, you can send it to me and say, hey, why didn't you send this one to me? And then I can look at it and say, oh, hey, I didn't send this to you because it didn't meet X criteria. And then you can decide, hey, we still want to see it or not. Most people look on Zillow, Realtor, or Redfin because those interfaces are really easy for the general public to understand, and they give them the information that they like to see, but they don't share a lot of the behind the scenes data that might make you not want to buy the house, but you didn't realize it had super high taxes or the HOA is out of control or something like that. So you peek, I seek. If you find something that I didn't send to you, just send it to me, send me the screenshot or whatever. And then I can tell you, hey, I didn't send this because of X. And then we can decide if we want to go see it. And then, like I said, if you're willing to update your criteria, just let me know and I'll change the search for you. All right, so let's wrap this up. Big goal, no plan. This is what I see a lot of buyers come to me with. They have this big goal of buying a home. They want to, get their kids into a great elementary school or whatever, but they don't have a plan. And they start working with an agent and they start in the middle of the process and everybody gets frustrated. So that's why we spend a lot of time up front building the parameters, building the plan, and then going to find the house instead of going to find the house and then figuring everything else out later. So number one, good process drives good results. I have a process, our team follows a process from A to Z to make sure that we ultimately meet your goal of finding the home. You're part of the plan building. So we might build the plan, or we have a template of a plan, and it might not fit your needs exactly. So we'll restructure it to make sure that it fits your needs. So let's build the plan together. And then lastly, we want to execute for you. So your big goal is to find the home and live in your new home. My big goal is to help you find the home and help you live in the home, and everybody's happy at the end. So I'm not saying it's not going to be stressful. It's not going to be crazy. There's going to be some weird things that happen when you buy your home that you're going to be like, oh, I had no idea this was going to happen. But my goal is to make it as easy as possible. So if you follow the plan of big goal, no plan, you're probably not going to meet the goal, right? But if we make the plan, execute the plan, then we'll find the big goal. If this was helpful for you and you're ready to find your new home in Denver, or you just have some more questions, just click the link below, schedule 15 minutes of time with me. We'll answer your questions, go over anything that you need help with. And then if you want to hire me as your agent and we like each other, cool. If we get through that call and we don't like each other and we never want to speak again, that's totally cool. I only want to work with people who want to work with me, and I want to work with them. Have a great day. Thank you for your time.